Hi everybody, Courtney here today to talk to you about money and mindset. And the reason I wanted to come in today and talk about this one is because it's been on my mind a lot lately, and that is how assumptions can hurt us when it comes to our finances. And I want to give you some examples of what is an assumption, who we might make an assumption about, and why that can hurt us financially, and what we need to do about it and how we need to do that. So the first thing is I'm going to give you some example of assumptions. My son has autism level 2. He lives by himself. You would never think that he would have been able to live by himself maybe 10 years ago, but he does. He drives and he lives by himself, but he needs a lot of help. I manage his finances. I go over and make sure he's not living in filth. I just came from there. That's why I have an old t-shirt on and my hair's a mess. I went over and helped him with some cleaning and some chores and some food. He's not good at budgeting money. He doesn't take great care of his car or his appointments or filling his medicine. A lot of this is because of anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorders and executive function problems. His entire life, from the time he got diagnosed, he's 25. He was diagnosed at the age of about 6. The doctors told me that people always would assume that he's more capable than he is. So he has autism level 2. There's 1, 2, 3. 2 means some support. One of them means no support, one is some support, and one is full support. Those would be the people that might be nonverbal and things like that. So he's in the middle. I have spent his whole life dealing with people thinking that I'm babying him. And so it can be super frustrating because yes, he's able to live on his own, but without some supports behind him, it probably would crash and burn. This old man that my husband and I used to go to this deli to eat, and there was this old man. He was always driving an old truck. He was that classic old farmer, skinny as a rail, always dirty. And I remember one day my husband said, that old man right there, he owns that beautiful farm we drive by, and he's worth millions. And by looking at him, you would just think he was an old dirty farmer. I mean, you just wouldn't know. I had a good friend who owned a brick and fireplace company, and he also was worth millions. He's your classic millionaire next door. Lived in the same house, was married to the same wife for years. Drove a nice truck, but other than that, you would never know that he was a multimillionaire. Like, he dressed decent, usually a pair of old Wranglers and a shirt. They took nice vacations, but nothing fancy. And when they retired, they did do a little bit more, but I mean, you would never, ever know. The next is something that's happened to me personally with my husband and myself, is that my husband is 12 years older than me. People often assume that I married a man with money. Not the case. I was the breadwinner when we met. I purchased this farm. I had the good credit. I'm the one that purchased the farm before we were married. So my husband is a hard worker, and eventually we would switch places and he would be the breadwinner. But I've had people make comments to me about, like, oh, that's a good financial plan. Marry an older man with money. And I'm like, my husband didn't have anything. He was in bankruptcy when we met. So people see things and they make assumptions based on our cultural stereotypes. And I want to talk about why this is dangerous. I'd like to stop there. If you're liking this kind of content, just quickly, please give it a thumbs up and share or subscribe. Subscribe. It sure helps the channel get the message out there. Currently, I'm not monetized, even though you may see commercials, but it helps grow my channel, and I sure appreciate it. So why does this matter? Why does it matter if we stereotype people or make assumptions? Because when we stereotype people or make assumptions, and we usually relate this to racism or ageism, but what it does is it not only hurts those people, right? It hurts people when we make stereotypes about them, but it keeps us in an oppressive place or in a place of presumed power, right? Oh, well, they didn't deserve that because they're whatever, right? They're just privileged, or they're just this color, or they just came from this background. But when we just assume things about other people, like all people back in the 80s could afford to buy a house on their income, what we do is we're creating blame. and we're blaming people, which keeps us in this place of oppressiveness or not taking responsibility for ourselves. If we're focused on what other people are doing and why they're where they are or whatever, we're using that to create a narrative about ourselves in our own life. And so that's not healthy, and it allows us to take the focus off of ourselves and onto someone else. And I was watching, I had been thinking about this. I wrote the note in my phone to do a video on this, but I saw a comedian this morning talking about, and I've had 2 of my 6 kids say to me, like, it's so much easier for y'all when you were younger. And I'm like, first of all, I didn't buy all the things my kids buy. I didn't get my nails done until I was 40. I didn't have subscriptions. I didn't waste a lot of money. It was really just needs versus wants. And I hear this all the time. I can't afford to buy a house. Well, I remember the first house I looked at buying. I ended up moving into another house, but it was $45,000, and that was the cheapest house we could find. That was back in around 1990, and we were making about $14,000 a year. And if you think about that, a house really should be about 2 to 3 times your income to be able to afford it. And I realized that wages have not kept up with inflation, but even those of us who are older have been through inflationary periods. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. We have seen recessions, huge, massive recessions. So it's not that it's necessarily easier, it's just, or more difficult, it's just different. And so while we can sit here and make excuses, well, I can't afford this or I can't afford that, that keeps us from focusing on what we can do. I had someone say to me in an earlier video, well, it's just one of those, like, I'm going to complain and focus on how you're wrong, and I'm going to focus on how I'm right. And I'm like, okay, do that. That's not going to move the needle forward. If you're focusing on how the system is rigged against you, you do not focus on where you can go forward. And most people, even myself, can trim our budget somewhere or make more money, unless we're just completely disabled and do not have the mental or physical capacity to do so. So we have to think about what we can do and how we can do that, whether that's working an extra job or getting a raise or creating a side hustle. And then we need to focus on when we need to do that. We need to identify what it is we want and what are the steps to get there. So we break that down into smaller increments. If we want to buy a house, we need to look and see how much house can we afford? How do we know how much house we can afford? How much down payment do we need? While you'll hear the Dave Ramseys of the world say you need a 20% down payment in a 15-year loan, that might not be doable for you right now. But there are tons of programs for first-time home buyers that are 3 to 5% down. If you're low income, there are programs for that as well. And the truth is, most people who own a home are financially going to be better off than those that don't in the long run. I'm not advocating for home ownership. It's just an example, because I think there are always instances where it's better to rent. But you have to think about, what is that going to look like? So if I'm making $25,000 a year and I want to buy a home and I need 3% down and I want to do 3 times my income, that means I can only afford $75,000. So that might look like buying a mobile home or buying a small condo. It's not going in a rural area. It's not going to look like buying a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in suburbia. So we have to get real with ourselves and quit blaming and quit making assumptions about other people and quit focusing on what other people are doing and focus on what we can control. If I'm only making $25,000, I'm probably going to need to earn more before I buy a house. Looking at the details of what you make, what you have, what your options are, what you need to save and cut back on, helps us know where we are, and that information helps inform us of where we want to go and how we're going to get there. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you so much for being here. Have a nice day.